You're listening to The Edge 105 FM. 105 FM. 105 FM.
Well, Jamaica has had a history of high number of road fatalities. Between January and December 2022, it was reported that 444 persons died from motor vehicle accidents. A snapshot of the highest number of fatalities in November 2022 revealed that motorcyclists had the highest number of fatalities. And in addition, data shows that most fatalities occur as a result of speeding. In an effort to reduce the number of fatalities and bring law and order to Jamaica's roadways, the Jamaican government introduced a new Road Traffic Act in 2018 and passed the Road Traffic Act regulations in 2022. Both the Act and the regulations entered into effect recently. However, there has been an outcry from the public about a need for further information on the rules under the legislation and questions about the practicality of some of the legislation. So in this episode, we will hear from Associate Attorney at DunnCox, Ms. Chantal Bennett, who will help us understand rules which now apply under the Road Traffic Act and regulations. Chantal, welcome to the legal landscape.
Thank you, Dion. Good evening to everyone.
Good evening on everyone's behalf. So again, we have Associate Attorney at DunnCox, I beg your pardon, Miss Chantal Bennett. She's with us now. So Chantal, when did the law under the Road Traffic Act and the Road Traffic Act regulations enter into effect?
The Road Traffic Act and the regulations which apply entered into law as at February 1, 2023. So that's about 7 days ago. This means that as of February 1, 2023, the old law no longer applies, and it is therefore important for everyone, every citizen, to be familiar with the new law, as if they're not familiar with the law, they could commit acts which would find them in breach of the law.
I like how you emphasize that, because it is everyone. We are all road users, not only persons who are behind a motor vehicle. Everyone is a road user. Everyone should know the law. And even though the law entered into effect on February 1 of this year, the government has indicated that aspects of the law will be implemented in phases. So what are some of the aspects of the law that will be implemented in phases, Chantal?
So the new law has introduced a number of requirements which require time to be implemented, and as such, the government will implement those rules over a transitional period. These rules include 1, the forms used for certain applications, such as an application for a driver's license. 2, the certification required for driving instructors. 3, the road infrastructure, and that includes speeding limits. 4, the timeline before an individual with a learner's license can apply for a driver's license. So in the case of the application forms, for example, the law has a form to be used to apply for a driver's license. However, as you may be aware, currently there is an old form, and a number of these forms are in print. What the government is saying is that you can continue to use the old form until it's depleted, and thereafter you'd use the new form. So that's 1. In terms of persons with a provisional license, the new law requires that there's a period of 6 months before you can apply for your driver's license. However, since the law came into effect 7 days ago, you might have somebody who applied for their provisional license in December 2022, and the question arises as to whether or not that person has to wait 6 months before applying for the driver's license. What the government has said is that they're exempting these persons who would have had their provisional license before the new law came into effect. 2 other areas that would be implemented in phases that are important are 1, road infrastructure. So the new law has certain designs for traffic signs, but as you might be aware, we have many signs out there now. Persons even put up signs, their own signs that they want to put up. So what the government has said is that the current signs, which vary from the design in the new law can remain for a period of time until they put in the new signs. As it relates to speed limits and speed limit zones, those have been revised. But practically it's going to take some time to remove the signs that exist now, as well as to put in new signs. So those are some of the important changes that will take some time to occur. One more that I think I also mentioned is driving instructors. So they're now required to be certified, but in order to become certified, you're going to have to undergo training. So what the government is basically saying is they're going to give time for you to undergo the training program, and then say by January 1, 2024, all driving instructors would require the certification.
And also with respect to the drivers of private motor vehicles, what are some of the duties under the law that they should be aware of?
Okay, so for drivers of private motor vehicles, a number of the same requirements apply, such as, you should travel with a copy of your insurance policy or your cover note, your certificate of fitness, and the license for the motor vehicle. But there are some other new duties that are important to bear in mind. And one would be to ensure that the registration plate on the motor vehicle is visible, as if it is not visible, you can be charged for an offense. Two, where there's an emergency vehicle, drivers of motor vehicles are required to yield the right of way to an emergency vehicle. As many times I've been in traffic and you'll hear an ambulance coming and none of the cars are moving, but you're required to yield way to the emergency vehicle. Mm-hmm. Two other areas to bear in mind is that drivers are required to ensure that the sound of their motor vehicle does not exceed the noise limit. So I'm sure many times you've heard motor vehicles before you actually see them. So now you drivers are required to ensure that the motor vehicle does not exceed a certain limit in terms of noise. A final one that I find interesting is that a driver of a motor vehicle must not operate a motor vehicle which emits a blue light or is capable of emitting a blue light. So a number of times we're driving and you can barely see, or you have this blue light that's blinding you. Mm-hmm. Motorists are required to ensure that their motor vehicle does not have that blue light, or they can be charged. So those are some of the things that can amount to offenses and their penalties. And of course, the penalties are much higher under the new legislation.
Yes. And Chantal, we have to bring in the motorcyclists as well, because in addition to rules for drivers of private motor vehicles, there are also rules for motorcyclists. And some of these could lead to an offense if they are not followed. Can you share some of those rules with us?
Right. So in Jamaica, we have a lot of motorcyclists, especially in the tourist areas. And the motorcyclists might have two pillion riders. Now, the new law requires that a motorcyclist must only have one passenger. In addition to only having one passenger, they're required to wear a protective helmet that provides full coverage for the face, has an adjustable visor, and a hard outer shell. The law even goes further to tell you the shape of the shell for that hard outer shell. In addition, where you're learning to drive a motorcycle rather, and you have a provisional license, you must be accompanied by a licensed motorcyclist on another motorcycle not far away. So there are a number of new requirements for motorcyclists. And of course, all of this is to ensure law and order.
And I have to ask you this one. Recently, there was a public outcry about the need for public passenger vehicles to have child restraints for children. The government has, however, indicated that it would amend this aspect of the law. Can you remind us what are the amendments that are made?
Right. So yesterday in Parliament, a presentation was made to essentially say that now, how the law is interpreted, taxi motor vehicle or public passenger vehicle required to have a child restraint or a child seat. And it was thought that was very impractical because around the world you hardly see a taxi or bus with a child seat. So what the government is recommending is that they'll insert a new regulation, the type of child restraint that is required depending on the age of the child and the type of the motor vehicle. So some examples are for licensed public passenger cars or buses, children under 1 year old must be restrained by an adult. So with the new change, an adult with their baby who is under 1 year old can go in the taxi, but she would be required to sit in the back of the motor vehicle and restrain her child. Now, in terms of children who are 1 to 3 years old, they may travel without a restraint or be restrained by an adult. If you're 3 to 6 year old, you can travel without a restraint or again be restrained by an adult or a lap belt. So what the government is basically doing is trying to be practical and also bear in mind the resources of various persons, because many taxmen pointed out they couldn't afford it. But at the same time, we need to ensure that our children are safe, because the purpose of the legislation is to reduce the number of road fatalities and get greater compliance with the law.
Thank you so very much. Any quick tidbits for us before we go?
Yes, sure. So under the new law, there is a road traffic appeal tribunal that is being established, and this tribunal will comprise of persons to the tribunal an aggrieved motorist can apply to appeal decisions of the Island Traffic Authority. So if the Island Traffic Authority has made a decision that you're not in agreement with, you can apply to the tribunal for them to review it.
Chantal, so informative. Thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you. A pleasure being here.
Thank you. Attorney at the DunnCox, we have with us today Associate Attorney at DunnCox, Ms. Chantal Bennett. And if you need further legal advice, contact DunnCox at 876-922-1500 or visit their website now, www.dunncox.com for more information. And join us next week. We'll be having Season 6, Episode 3 of The Legal Landscape.